I'm what you might describe as a healing junkie. Now, I've kind of had to be. I have experienced a variety of mental health issues since I was a child. So, you can definitely say I've tried my fair share of healing modalities over the years. And they've had varying levels of success at different stages of my life, and all have had applicability at some stage. However, I've found myself so many times feeling extremely frustrated at the fact that I continued to struggle, that I continued to experience quite a significant level of pain, and I did a lot of kind of shadow work looking at the role that my ego had in keeping me in this kind of oscillation between superiority and inferiority, looking at my coping mechanisms, trying to find acceptance for my defenses, trying to recognize where my ego was driving my behaviors, trying to recognize my beliefs, my conditioning, and the impact that it had on the way in which I interpreted other people and the suffering that caused me. And I nearly taught myself into oblivion. And I think that's part of the problem sometimes. We're so convinced that if we can just change our thoughts, that our lives are going to change, or if we can just challenge our feelings and sit with our feelings, that everything is going to be so much better and we're going to reach this utopia of love and compassion and tenderness. And that's just not life. I mean, we're human, we're not superhuman. And I think part of what I was struggling with was this kind of double whammy of feeling bad because I was still feeling bad, and believing that at some stage I wasn't going to feel bad anymore. That I almost kind of sought out this spiritual bypass, that if I just prayed and meditated and journaled enough, that someday everything would be rosy, that I'd live in some sort of utopian Fiona land where everything felt good. And I think it was that kept me stuck for so long and continues to keep me stuck, because I'm still not beyond that thinking. I still get kind of very much pulled back into that frame of mind, assuming that there is a permanent state of equanimity and that you can have continuous contentment. And I think the more that I have tried to change how I think and how I feel and fought with my struggles, the more I have suffered as a result. And again, it's this kind of whole Buddhist concept of, recognizing that suffering is inevitable and making your peace with that, as opposed to fighting against it, because the more that you resist it, the more that you actually struggle as a consequence. So it's about not seeing yourself as some sort of Rubik's cube that needs to be aligned, that maybe just making peace with your brokenness and surrendering to the fact that you are going to struggle and that there are things in life that are going to hurt you deeply, and allowing yourself to be willing to show up to those feelings of jealousy and sadness and anger and resentment, and sit down beside them and just be like, hey, I'm here with openness and curiosity and hopefully a bit of a sense of humor, and how can we get through this, how can we just allow this as opposed to resisting it. And I do think an awful lot of people kind of approach healing in the hopes of giving themselves some sort of psychological armor from pain. They don't like how they feel and they don't want to feel like it anymore, and it's that resistance that causes a double whammy of suffering. And this has been something that it has taken me a very long time to even begin to try and get my head round. That I'm not my thoughts, I am not my feelings, I am not my body, I'm also not my resistance. And it's very intricate, and sometimes I can get too bogged down in it, because again, I try to understand everything and I want to kind of conceptualize everything, as opposed to just being very humble about my whole approach to things, and recognizing that there are no answers and that there are no solutions, and kind of that when I go into a softening practice, or when I go into an acceptance practice with a set agenda of feeling better, feeling more peaceful, moving out of a place of pain, then the likelihood is at some stage, if not more often than not, I'm going to end up being pretty damn disappointment, because I don't think meditation, for me anyway, and I'm not speaking for everybody, it hasn't been a place that I find respite. It isn't something that I sit down to and I'm like, because oftentimes I've gone into it with the hopes of feeling better or feeling calmer or, escaping from whatever it is that I was experiencing. And it's only as I've kind of made peace with the fact that sometimes it can be quite a triggering experience for me, because I think it's when I sit down and allow the reality of what it is that's hurting me to fully be released, that I experience the actual intensity of how much it's actually bothering me. And that can be tough going. And I think I felt like I had to erase that or eradicate it as part of the practice. And again, I felt like as if I was doing it wrong. I felt like as if, this is meant to be making me feel better, not making me feel worse, as opposed to be willing to coexist with what it was that I was experiencing, recognizing that this is part and parcel of my existence. So I need to learn to live with this, as opposed to assuming that it's something that I'm going to wipe out or that I'm going to get rid of, because we're always going to be dragged back into irritation and pain and, feeling bad about ourselves and feeling inferior. And I suppose if we can just learn to tolerate that a little bit, if we can be like, okay, am I willing to sit with this today? Am I willing to be with this today without any guarantees that it's going to get better, without any guarantees that I'm going to soften or that I'm going to feel at peace? That's the vulnerability. That vulnerability of not having a guarantee. That vulnerability of recognizing that you may feel like this again, that you're not going to fix it forever, and to still make the effort to recognize your honest human experience, to make a level of peace with it is great, and to try and not take yourself so seriously. And again, I'm a major contender there. I tend to think that everything has to be at this really, really logical, intellectualized level, and that I have to understand every emotion, and that I have to be able to trace it back to when I was 3 or whatever. And sometimes you just need to kind of take yourself a little less seriously, and try to just apply that curiosity and be like, okay, what is it that I'm actually feeling here? I'm feeling sadness. Jesus, I'm feeling sadness. And just let it be with that, and just be with that sadness or be with that jealousy or whatever it is, and smile at it and be with it and hold its hand, and be kind to it. And even if you can, be curious with it, be a little bit humorous with it. All of these things that you can kind of try, as opposed to always running to a defense, running to find relief, running to resist. Because a friend of mine said to me the other day, you can spend your whole life running from things, and we do tend to want to avoid the harder parts of life, and unfortunately there's no avoiding them. They're part and parcel of who we are. And I think the more we can learn to coexist with the aspects of ourselves that cause us pain, the less suffering we're going to experience.